Thank you. Good morning. Oh. Happy Easter. Happy Resurrection Sunday. So this morning we are going to go back into a time of worship and have a little extra extended time after we're finished. And so I was told that my sermon needed to be brief this morning, but any of you who have attended this church for any amount of time know that that's incredibly difficult for me. So I'm going to do my very best, and God willing, I will not be long-winded this morning. But you know what? It is what it is. And you're all here, and you're captive, so we're going to go on a journey together. Lock the doors. Someone's excited to be here. Now, this morning what I want to talk about is not, obviously it's Resurrection Sunday, but I want to talk about not just what happened, but the reason it happened. There's a very specific reason why Jesus came and he died and he rose from the dead. And it wasn't just so that, we wouldn't have to worry about death or the afterlife. It's because he wanted to come to bring us life and bring us near to him. And so I want to go through just some thoughts that I've had over the last couple days of what that's supposed to look like. And then when we're finished, like I said, we'll have a time of worship together. But this morning we're going to be in Romans 8. So if you want to turn there. Romans 8:34 says, "Who then will condemn us? No one. For Christ Jesus died for us and was raised to life for us, and he is sitting in the place of honor at God's right hand pleading for us." Everything that Jesus did while he was on this earth was to make a way for us to be able to be with the Father. And the importance of him coming back from the dead is the fact that if Jesus had died and stayed in the grave, then it would have just been to swap places. But he didn't want to swap places with us. He wanted to be brother to us. And so he came back from the dead so that he could sit at the right hand of the Father and say, "Hey, Dad, my brothers and sisters, there's some of them that are still lost and they don't know what they're doing, but we can find a way. We found a way to bring them back to ourselves, and now they have a way." And so we have to make the decision, and I wanted to take this passage out of Romans, and I kind of parallel it with the story of the prodigal son this morning. All we have to do, because Jesus paid the price, is simply come to our senses. Luke 15:17-19 says, and we're talking, so just some background for those of you who may not know the story. What happened, there's this story of the prodigal son, which our theology professor said, the story really shouldn't be called the story of the prodigal son. It should be called the story of the father with ridiculous grace. Because the prodigal son did all the wrong things and the father did all the right things. But what happened is there's these two sons that they've grown up, they've worked for their father their whole life. There's an older son and the younger son. And the younger son comes to his father and says, basically, "I'm tired of working for you, old man, and I want to go live the life that I want to live. I don't want to be, I don't want to be submitted to you any longer. I want you to give me my inheritance so I can go and do what I want to do." Can you imagine, like those of you who are parents, can you imagine if your kid went to you and be like, "Listen, I can't wait for you to die, so can you just give me my half now?" Like, even the fact that he got past that part shows that there's ridiculous grace in the father. Because the father could have been like, "Actually, you know what? You don't get anything now. Congratulations, you've lost." And honestly, the dad didn't have to give him anything because he's the younger son. He actually wasn't due any inheritance because it belonged to the older son. So the audacity of the younger son to come and be like, "I don't want you just to give me half of what you have. I want you to give me half of what is rightfully my brother's." And we wonder why the brother was so upset at the end. And so he comes and he's like, give me half. I want it now and I'm going to go." And so the father's like, "Okay." That wouldn't have been my response. But the father's like, okay, hold on, I'm having an issue. This is what happens when you... All right, that's better. And so he goes and he lives, it says he just lives a wild life. He spends it on wild living, on prostitutes, on all the things that you can imagine, wild living. And about the time he runs out of money, a famine hits. And he has nothing left. He has no food, he has no money, he has no friends because all of his friends were just there because of his money. And now that it's all gone, so are the friends, so are all the wild living, so everything. And so he's so hungry that he finds a job working at a pig farm, which any of you who know Jewish culture, not a great place to be, right? And so he goes and he works on this pig farm, and he gets so hungry that it says that even the slop that he's giving to the pigs, he's like, oh man, that looks good. I'm really hungry. And it's in that moment that he's like, hold on a second. I could be a servant for my dad, and I know my life would be way better. So I'm just going to go and beg him to take me on as an employee. And so he goes back to the farm. This is what happens. It says, when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. Because of the death and resurrection of Jesus, you can pick yourself up out of the filth and start making your way back to the Father's house. Yes. And not only is there a way made for you, but now you have the right to do so. The only thing that you have to do is recognize, I don't actually want to be here. This mess, this heartache, this pain, all of this stuff that I'm involved in, I don't actually have to live in this. I can go home, and even it's better to be a servant in my Father's house than it is to be a slave on a pig farm. But some of us decide that the slavery in the pig farm, longing for the scraps of the pigs, is better than what God has to offer. And all we have to do is just come to our senses and say, hold on a second. I can go back. Because though I may have done everything wrong, he's still my Father. And I know that at the very least, I'll have a job and I'll have some food. Here's the thing, though, about Jesus. Hold on, I'll get to that. Let's go to Romans 8:35 through 39. It says, can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or are persecuted or hungry or destitute or in danger or threatened with death? As the scriptures say, for your sake we are killed every day, we are being slaughtered like sheep. No, despite all of these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us. And I am convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love, neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither fears of today or worries about tomorrow. Not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. No power in the sky above or in the earth below. Indeed, nothing in all creation will ever be able to separate us from the love of God that is revealed in Christ Jesus our Lord. You see, the death and resurrection of Jesus isn't about us being saved from God's wrath. It's us being availed to God's love. Jesus sits on the right hand of the Father, but he's not a buffer, he's a bridge. We look at Jesus and we say, thank God that Jesus is there, otherwise the wrath of God would come down on me. Yes, that is true, but the fact of the matter is that he didn't die and resurrect and go to the right hand of the Father so that you wouldn't have to be punished. He died and was resurrected and sits at the right hand of the Father so that you can come in and receive the love that God's been trying to give us from the beginning of time. Yeah. That was the design. The design was loving union with God until Adam and Eve broke it. And the whole purpose of Jesus wasn't so that we could be set free from the wrath, but we could be set free for the love. In Luke 15:20, it says, so he returned home to his father. This is the prodigal son. And while he's still a long way off, his father saw him coming, Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. The Father's heart is for you. Because the reality is that at the end of the day, even when you come to the realization that you're sitting in the filth, God came to you. The Father didn't stay in the house and was like, well, someday, maybe he'll come to his senses and he'll come home and I might let him through the gate if he's lucky. Maybe I'll give him a drink of water and let him go on about his life and be like, you done messed it up. Depart from me. I never knew you. He could say that. He has every right to say that. But what does he do? Not only did he, this is the thing, the Father was watching. The Father was watching for the day that his Son might come home, not knowing whether or not he would. The reality is that Jesus died not knowing whether or not you would come. The Father sent his Son and watched him be beaten and broken and die, not knowing if people would say yes to him. Without the guarantee, he knew, but without the guarantee that every person he died for would say yes to him. But the Father looks longingly for each person that has made the decision, I'm tired of living in this, and I'm going to go home to my dad. Because at least life there will be better than it is here, even if I'm a servant. But what happened is, I would imagine the son didn't know what to do with himself, because here he is, disgusting. He smelled awful, I'm sure, and he's probably been walking for a long ways. He's tired, he's dusty, and he's walking down the road, and he lifts up his eyes to see his father running at him. And I'm sure that there was a mixture of different emotions here, like, oh no, he's coming to say, don't you come back. You're not worried. You're. But then also this excitement of like, it's my dad. And how surprised must he have been when the father came running out, and instead of saying, don't come any closer, he embraced him in his state of filth. And he embraced him and he kissed him and he said, I'm glad you're home. This is the design. This is what we're called to live in loving embrace with our Father. We just have to turn and receive that embrace. You guys following me? The son was expecting to be a slave, but what he was met with is what we find in Romans 8:15 through 17. So you've not received the spirit that makes you a fearful slave. Instead, you received God's Spirit when he adopted you as his own children. Now we call him Abba, Father. For his Spirit joins with our spirit to affirm that we are God's children. And since we are his children, we are his heirs. In fact, together with Christ, we are heirs of God's glory. But if we are to share in his glory, we must also share in his suffering. Here's the reality. We talk about adoption all the time and how we're adopted into the family of Christ. Can I tell you that every person that is living and breathing on this earth, and every person that has come before us, every person that has come after us, has had the price of adoption paid for them? The price isn't paid when we say yes. The price was paid when Jesus died. That was the price of adoption. Some of you are looking at me like, hold on there. I'm getting there. Your price of adoption has been paid. What are you going to do with it? In Luke 15:21 through 24, it says, his son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both you and heaven, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. But his father said to his servants, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get the ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf that we have fattened. We must celebrate with a feast. For the son of mine was dead and now has returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So the party began. We've already established that you can't get away from God's love, and the price for adoption has been paid. But this is what happens. We all know Jesus died and the veil was torn, right? Which means there's nothing that separates us from the presence of God. He's omnipresent. His presence is everywhere. The problem is that God has come and he has paid a price for your adoption, and he's standing there with the robe, with the ring, with the sandals, and he's saying, I have this for you. And then you have a choice. Am I going to accept it, or am I just going to stand here dirty? Because your acceptance determines your inheritance. Because you may be adopted, but until you put on the robe, until you put on the ring, until you place the sandals on your feet, there's no inheritance for you. Because it's the robe and the ring and the sandals that shows the rest of the world that I belong to him. This is the crazy thing. We're all so scared sometimes of being associated with God, but it's our association with God that gives us the inheritance at the end of our lives. And it's also the thing that brings us glory in this life. But we think if I just stay dirty, no one's going to notice me. But you have the robe that he's saying, I'm going to put it on you. You have the ring that says, you have my authority to walk in. And you have the sandals. And historically in Jewish culture, only the family wore shoes. The servants and the slaves, they didn't get shoes. And so if you went walking into town with the signet ring and the shoes, that means that not only did you have the authority, but you were part of the family. And we have this opportunity to put on the ring that says, I'm marked as his, but we also have the opportunity to put on the shoes that say, I belong to his family. I don't only have his authority, I have his name. Some of us are standing next to Jesus, but we insist on staying naked and ashamed. And he's standing right there with clothes. Myra, I'm actually going to go a little bit farther into Luke. It says, meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. Your brother is back, he was told, and the father's killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him. He replied, all these years I have slaved for you, and never once refused to do a single thing that you've told me. And in all that time, you never gave me even one goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours who comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf. His father said, look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he's found. Sometimes in the church we have a tendency to look at those who have been lost and say, well, hold on a second. I've been here doing the work a lot longer. So why do they get to do that? But this is the thing that we forget. Just like the father went out to the prodigal son that was coming home, the father went out to the son that never left. The father still did the work. And sometimes it's easier when we've been in a place of darkness to receive our Father with humility than it is when we've been doing the work the whole time. But our posture has to be the same, whether we stayed, whether we did. For those who have grown up in the church, who have done all the things, who were baptized at a young age, who, they memorized all their Bible verses and they did all the things and they wore the bracelets and they in my time they wore the purity ring and they did all the things. They did it all right. And then we get to this point, we're like, hold on a second. I see all these messed up people that are coming in. They don't know what I had to do to get to this point. And what that reveals is that the son that stayed did it out of obligation, not love for the father. And the father still looked at him and said, listen, everything I have is yours. But even though the son never left, all he saw was his adoption. He didn't see his inheritance. And so when God comes to you, he gives you the choice. He said, you can stay broken with a price paid for you, or you can accept the price of adoption and become an heir in my family. Our own children are the same way. We pay a high price to raise them, but they can always walk away. It's like if one day my son, Liam, comes to me and he was like, wait a second. I've been your son longer, and I'm your biological son. So why does Mila get everything that I get? She was adopted. So why should she get everything that I get? The beauty of the sacrifice is that we are seen as sons and daughters just as Jesus is seen as a son. That's why the price had to be paid the way that it was. That was the plan. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how all of my children came to be my children. It was God's plan that brought them there. So just like God gave me Liam and Zion and Jovi, God gave me Mila. Same father, same gift, different wrapping. And so this morning, I'm going to ask the worship team to come back up. Will you choose to be a lost child or a found heir? And as we worship, we're going to have, as we've been doing recently, we're going to just have a time of response. And listen, this isn't just for people who have never known the Lord. If you're here and you have never known the Lord, this is the day. This is the day for you to look at your situation and say, I don't have to live here anymore. Because you have a Father in heaven who is not just expecting your return, but He's watching. He's watching with anticipation for the moment where you get up and dust yourself off out of that pig pen and say, I'm going to my dad's house. And He has run already out to meet you. All you have to do is turn and embrace it. For some of you who have been in the church your whole life and you're like, well, hold on a second. Remember, your Father ran out to meet you even as you were working in the fields, even as you were doing the things that were quote unquote right. And that same love that He has for the one that was lost, He has for you. That same inheritance that He has for the one that was lost, He has for you. And if we can learn to love the Father, then we'll also learn to love the lost, because we'll know His heart. So this morning, if you're in a place where you're just like, you know what? I don't know that I've accepted that inheritance. I don't know that I've accepted not just my adoption and the price that was paid, but the robe. I don't want to just be set apart for Him. I want to look like Him. I want people to know that I belong to Him. The Word says that if you declare me before man, I will declare you before my Father in heaven. So we're going to continue to worship. We also have communion set up at the tables like we regularly do. We're not doing it like we always do, where it's like, it's there for you to partake if you want, when you want. So we're going to do a couple more songs, and when you feel like, you know what, I'm going to go take this time to remember what Jesus did, then feel free to go to the one of the tables. But also, if during this time you feel like you need to make a decision for Jesus, you want to be a part of His family, you want to put on the robe, the ring, and the sandals, then there are lots of people here that are more than willing to pray for you. And you can either grab someone next to you and be like, pray for me, or you can come to the front and have people pray for you. But we're just going to have a time to worship the God who gave up everything so that we could be called his and so that we could receive an inheritance that he has for us.
In the darkness, we were